If you're a manager or a project manager or you're running a business, you have stakeholders. Who are your stakeholders and what do they mean to you? And more importantly, how do you manage your stakeholder relationship, their expectations, and make sure they're aligned with your outcomes? Because misalignment with your stakeholders could spell disaster for any project or business. So coming up next on Project Skills Mentor, we're going to start the process of talking about stakeholder management and how you can succeed. Because the bottom line is approximately 50% of projects fail because of lack of stakeholder engagement. Well, the first thing you need to do is build your stakeholder strategy. That's your plan for how you're going to engage, interact with, communicate, and create results that align with your stakeholders. So why do you need a stakeholder strategy? It can reduce resistance before you start. If you get everyone together in one go and just take them through the mission of the project, that could be your project charter, it could be a business case, it could be just a kickoff document. You are aligning them, you are bringing them together, you are asking them for their commitment to helping this thing happen. And then you are exchanging these views on expectations between you and then amongst the other stakeholders, because possibly these stakeholders need to align across each other before they can even align to you. So making sure that alignment's happened, job one. It also builds trust and credibility. If you are transparent, they will be more likely to trust you. If you have your facts straight and show that you do, they are more likely to trust you. If you already have commitment from executive sponsorship, you are more likely to be trusted and have credibility amongst your peers and amongst the people in your stakeholder group. And make no mistake, your stakeholders have power over your success or failure in a couple of ways. They can defund your project, stop your project, or simply not adopt or accept your project. If they're an end user or a customer, their lack of adoption or using of your solution, business transformation, new roles, or new software could be the death knell of your project. So who is a stakeholder exactly? Internal leadership, people who hold the bag of money or the decisions or the escalation capability. And you might not think about this one, but functional teams. Teams that need to either deliver something to your team so they can do their work, or teams that will be delivering the solution in the end. That end user's adoption will be the final outcome of your project, which means they are also a stakeholder. Stakeholders can also be, depending on the kind of project, external partners. That could be another supplier, service operators, people who bring in subject matter expertise, or suppliers of actual equipment, facilities, things like that. And if you want to know more about how to contract and manage your third-party relationships with suppliers and others, check out this video. And if you want more information, I'll put links in the show notes below so you can go right to those videos or access my blogs for more information. And one of the things I've found in my 40 years of being a project manager is the best way to assure that you have alignment with your stakeholders is to get all of them in a room at least once to create alignment. And if you're talking about externals, you might bring in someone who either represents that person, even if it's not from that group, or is someone directly from that group. So you don't bring in all your customers. You bring in one or two key customers who have maybe a relationship with your company and so are somewhat familiar to the ways of working. You might do the same with key suppliers. Having a kickoff meeting about the transformation, explaining the importance of their role, and then setting up a governance strategy will help you maintain this alignment, expectation setting, and clarity about what you need from them and what they will be getting from you. So let's take a look at this card and talk about who are your stakeholders. Now here we're not talking about their roles, their functional roles, such as customer, regulatory agent, or advisor. Here we're talking about who they are in relationship to the change. And this is your change framework. Your stakeholder change framework is going to focus on who they are to your project. First of all, you have leaders. So these are the big decision makers. They give you the money, they give you the go-ahead, and they escalate when things start going wrong. They're there to clear the path and enable the project or the transformation to take place in the first place. Next, you have the connectors. If you're running a project around how accounting is done within the company, but you're not talking to the ordering group, or maybe they're running a project too that you need to align with, if you're not connecting these two things, they could be out of alignment by the time you go live, and that could create problems for both projects. Don't do that. Align with your connectors. Next, we have the catalysts. These are the high-powered people who can make things happen. That can be getting out positive word about your project, or creating a sense of community so that the right people are coming together at the right time to talk about issues, design decisions, and go-live requirements to make sure this project will be a go. And then you have drivers. These are people who actually contribute to the project. They are action-oriented. They may be stakeholders from external groups or from other parts of the organization. Either way, these drivers are what help you move your project ahead. Maybe you're doing that accounting project I told you about, but you'll need IT to help as well. If they're not helping you drive forward the IT requirements you need to get your hardware and software in place in time, your project won't be able to go live. And then you have your integrators. These integrators are the detailed connectors that we talked about earlier. They are literally integrating and synergizing projects, making sure alignment happens at the detailed level. So they might be going back and forth, in my example, between the accounting group designing a new accounting system and the ordering group, and these integrators might come from other areas as well. That might be marketing, advertising, and also customer services. And finally, you have operators. These are the roll up your sleeves, get the job done people. These are the people in your team, for instance. And they are in the adjacent teams, possibly suppliers, subject matter experts, contractors. These are the people getting the job done. Now, each of these groups, as you'll see on this card, have different levels of influence in terms of being stakeholders. Let me give you an example. If you have an operator who's a coder, they have a medium power level because they mostly have functional influence. What do I mean by that? How they configure things is based on what the customer said. The customer is the one with the real influence here. The coder is meant to just execute that goal. And then finally, you might have someone who's very high-powered, high influence, like the leaders. And their goal is to make sure the outcome is beneficial to the company as a whole. They're not interested in the line of code written or the precise configuration made. They're interested in the big picture outcome. So in this group, you see high level of power and high level of influence. You know who your stakeholders are by role. You know who they are by your framework of stakeholder change management. Now, what do you need to know? The last step in your strategy that we're going to talk about today is your Stakeholder Readiness Map. Now, this is a point-in-time snapshot. Maybe you want to check this when you're meeting them one-on-one before your kickoff. And then periodically through the project, you're going to want to check in and just sort of test where they are. This can be done in a couple of ways. One is interviewing them and then making your own assessment based on that interview. The next is just asking them. And both of those ways work for different kinds of purposes and also different situations, different levels of projects. But ultimately, you're going to want to land on where people are. Knowing that is going to be really important to the next step we're going to talk about in the next video, which is how you move them from point A to point B. On this spectrum, influencer is the optimum and blocker is the worst, obviously. You might want to make this a transparent process. In some of my projects, I have. In others, this is kind of in your back pocket. You're not really trying to show people you think they're a blocker necessarily, but you need to know if they are. So in your best case scenario, your influencers are your change agents. These are people who are helping drive the change forward, normalize it within the company, and make everybody cool about it. They are leading by example. Your collaborators are actually actively supporting your project. They may even be spokespersons for your end product. Supporters are stakeholders who are fully invested and give you the green light. So they are not standing in your way. They are helping to push things forward, just not as actively as collaborators and influencers. If you need to get someone from negative, you might not get them all the way to influencer. They may just land on neutral. I'm not going to help you, but I'm also not going to hurt you. Generally, that's a bad thing, especially if they're at that top echelon of high power, high influence. You really want those people to be in the green. Skeptics, people who aren't sure the solution will work. And, I've had that. I've run workshops where I've had a skeptic who actually clapped at the end and said, I didn't think you'd get there, but you showed me how you're going to make it all work. So your goal is to at least get the skeptics to neutral, because getting them there or getting them a little bit further to supporter will help you reduce the friction in the project and reduce the stakeholder friction that happens when you need to escalate something. And then you have blockers or resistors. These are people who are actively pursuing a negative outcome for your project. They're either trying to stop it. Maybe you're in competition with their project with resources and whatnot, so they want to stop your project, or they just think it's a bad idea. Maybe it actually reduces their end game goals or authority after this project's realized. Finding out what those are, and they can be personal, they're not always business related, will help you to deal with the issue. Sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly. Sometimes your key supporter at the very highest level maybe needs to go have a chat with them. Sometimes you can use a connector to find out what's the real deal behind the situation, and sometimes you just need to have a direct conversation. And if you agree to disagree about your project or the goals of your project, you either need to mitigate their risk to the project by asking them to step aside and let someone else who wants to be part of the project join as a stakeholder, or you need to minimize their influence. They can be a big part of the rumor mill or poor decision-making or slow decision-making. Those things can affect you. You can't just leave blockers and resistors alone. You have to manage them actively. So for all of your stakeholders, remember, you need to know who to communicate with, what to communicate about, and how to communicate to that individual. Stakeholders who are really important may need their own specific strategy. Does that take a lot of work? Yes. Does it take more work to deal with a blocker or resistor? Absolutely yes. So in my next video and blog, I'm going to talk about how you design more of this strategy we've been talking about, how you execute it, and how you ensure with right KPIs that you keep your stakeholders aligned and move them forward to be change agents for whatever you're transforming in your business. I hope you found this information helpful. If you did, please give this video a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and check out these videos on stakeholder management and also how to build a governance model. And I'll see you next time on ProjectSkillsMentor.com. Bye-bye, everybody.